The music box fell from Katherine Parker's trembling hands, hitting the dusty floorboards of the abandoned homestead with a hollow clunk that seemed to echo the emptiness in her chest. She had been riding for 3 days straight across the unforgiving California landscape, searching for the place her mother had called home before consumption had taken her just 2 weeks prior. Now, in the spring of 1878, Katherine stood in what remained of her grandfather's house outside Knight's Ferry, California, surrounded by memories she had never been part of and ghosts she would never meet. The music box had been tucked away in a trunk her mother had given her on her deathbed, along with a hastily drawn map and a whispered plea to find the family she had left behind. Katherine bent down to retrieve the delicate wooden box, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings on its surface. Roses intertwined with thorns, their stems forming a pattern that seemed to tell a story of both beauty and pain. She tried to wind the small key on the side, but it would not turn. The mechanism inside rattled uselessly when she shook it gently. Whatever song it once played had been silenced by time and neglect. The sound of hooves outside made her freeze. She was alone out here, miles from the nearest town, in a house that looked like it had not seen life in years. The windows were broken, the roof sagged in places, and the furniture that remained was covered in layers of dust thick enough to write in. She had not expected company, and out here in the wild country, unexpected visitors were rarely the friendly kind. Katherine moved to the broken window, careful to stay hidden behind the warped wooden frame. A single rider approached, sitting tall in the saddle on a paint horse that looked well cared for despite the dust of the trail. The man wore typical cowboy attire, a worn hat pulled low over his face, a vest over a faded blue shirt, and a gun belt that sat easy on his hips like it belonged there. He dismounted with the fluid grace of someone who had spent more time on horseback than on foot. She watched as he tied his horse to the old hitching post, which swayed dangerously under the simple strain of the reins being looped around it. He glanced at the house, and she saw his face clearly for the first time. He was young, probably not much older than her own 21 years, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days of stubble and eyes that seemed to take in every detail of his surroundings. There was a wariness about him, a careful way of moving that suggested he had learned to be cautious the hard way. Katherine's hand went to the small pistol she carried in her skirt pocket. Her mother had insisted she learn to shoot before making this journey, and though Katherine had protested that she was a schoolteacher, not a gunfighter, she had learned. The weight of the weapon felt heavy now, a reminder that she was far from the civilized streets of San Francisco where she had spent most of her life. The man's boots made hollow sounds on the porch steps. Katherine held her breath, her fingers tight around the music box in one hand and the pistol in the other. The door creaked open slowly, and she saw him silhouette against the bright afternoon sun. "Hello." His voice was deep but not threatening, carrying a note of genuine curiosity rather than menace. "Saw your horse around back. Did not mean to startle anyone. Name's Austin Vance. I work the cattle ranch about 5 miles east of here." Katherine stepped out from behind the wall, keeping the pistol visible but not aimed at him. His eyes went to the weapon first, then to her face, and she saw surprise register there. "This is my grandfather's property," she said, proud that her voice came out steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. "I have every right to be here." Austin raised his hands slowly, palms out in a gesture of peace. "Not disputing that, madam. Just did not know old Henry Parker had any kin left. He passed on about 3 years back. Place has been empty since." The confirmation that her grandfather was dead hit Katherine harder than she expected. She had known it was likely, given that her mother had not heard from him in over a decade, but hearing it stated as fact made it real in a way it had not been before. "He was my mother's father," Katherine said, lowering the pistol slightly but not putting it away. "She died 2 weeks ago in San Francisco. I came to see if there was any family left here." Something shifted in Austin's expression, a softening around his eyes that spoke of personal understanding. "I am sorry for your loss. Losing your mother, that is a hard thing. My own passed when I was 15. The shared grief created a tentative bridge between them. Katherine finally put the pistol back in her pocket, though she kept her hand near it. Austin took that as permission to step further into the house, his gaze moving over the abandoned furniture and dust-covered memories. "Your grandfather was a good man," Austin said quietly. "Kept to himself mostly, but he was fair in his dealings and kind to those who needed it. When he got sick, some of us from the neighboring ranches took turns checking on him, but he was stubborn as a mule about accepting help. Passed peacefully in his sleep, or so the doctor said." Katherine felt tears prick at her eyes. She had never known this man who shared her blood, had never heard his voice or felt his embrace, yet the loss of the possibility of knowing him carved a hollow space in her chest. Her mother had left California as a young woman after a bitter argument Katherine had never fully understood, and pride or stubbornness, or perhaps just the passage of time, had kept them apart until death made reunion impossible. "Did he ever mention my mother?" Katherine asked, hating how small her voice sounded. "Margaret, did he ever ask about her?" Austin's hesitation was answer enough, but he spoke gently. "I only knew him the last year of his life after I came to work for the Sutter Ranch. He did not talk much about his past. But there was a sadness in him sometimes, like a man with regrets." Katherine nodded, swallowing hard against the lump in her throat. She looked down at the music box still clutched in her hand, its broken mechanism a fitting metaphor for the fractured family history she was trying to piece together. "What is that?" Austin asked, nodding toward the box. "Something my mother gave me. It was her mother's, I think." "A music box, but it is broken. Has been for years, probably." She held it out toward him, and he took it carefully, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle with the delicate object. Austin turned the box over, examining it from all angles. He tried the key, felt the resistance, and then held it up to his ear and gave it a careful shake. "Mechanism is jammed. Might be able to fix it if you would like. I am pretty good with small repairs." Ranch life teaches you to fix just about anything, since the nearest proper repair shop is a day's ride away. "You would do that?" Katherine asked, surprised by the offer. "No reason not to. Your grandfather was a good neighbor, even if I did not know him long. Least I can do is help his granddaughter." Austin smiled for the first time, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made Katherine's heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with fear. She looked away, unsettled by her reaction. She had not come to California looking for romance. She had come seeking answers, closure, some connection to the past her mother had left behind. But here was this cowboy with kind eyes and capable hands, offering help with no expectation of anything in return, and Katherine found herself wanting to trust him. "I would appreciate that," she said. "Thank you, Mr. Vance." "Austin, please. Mr. Vance was my father." He tucked the music box carefully into a pocket of his vest. "I will take this back to the ranch, work on it tonight and tomorrow. Should have it fixed in a day or two if the parts are not too damaged." "Are you sure?" Katherine asked. "I do not want to impose." "No imposition. Besides, gives me a good reason to ride back out here, make sure you are settling in all right." Austin's expression grew more serious. "Speaking of which, you planning to stay here? House needs a lot of work before it would be fit to live in. Katherine looked around at the dilapidated homestead. She had not thought that far ahead. Her plan, such as it was, had been to reach her grandfather's home and figure out the rest once she got here. She had enough money saved from her teaching position to last a few months, but she would need to find work eventually. The house was a disaster, but it was hers now, the only piece of her family history she had left. "I do not know," she admitted. "I suppose I need to assess what repairs are needed, how much they would cost. I have some money, but not a fortune." Austin nodded thoughtfully. "Tell you what. I will come by day after tomorrow, bring the music box back, and I can look over the place properly. Give you an honest assessment of what needs doing. Some of it you might be able to hire out, but some of it I could help with. The boys at the ranch and we have helped neighbors with barn raisings and such before. If you are planning to stay, folks around here will help. That is how things work out in these parts." The kindness in his offer made Katherine's throat tight. In San Francisco, she had been surrounded by people yet often felt alone. Here, miles from the nearest neighbor, a stranger was offering the kind of help she had never thought to ask for. "Why are you being so kind to me?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Austin looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes thoughtful. "Because someone was kind to me once when I needed it, and I learned that is how you build something worth having out here. Life in the West is hard enough without making it harder by being cold to folks. Plus, like I said, your grandfather was a good man. Feels right to help his family." Katherine felt something shift inside her chest, a warmth spreading that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun streaming through the broken windows. "Thank you, Austin. I accept your offer and I am grateful for it." "Good." He tipped his hat to her, a gesture that was both old-fashioned and charming. "You have food, water. There is a well out back that should still be good, but you will need to draw from it a while to clear out the stale water. I have supplies in my saddlebags, enough for a few days." "Right then. I will leave you to get settled. You need anything before I go, I could help you clear a space, get that stove working if the chimney is not too blocked up." Katherine was tempted to accept, but she also felt the need to prove to herself that she could handle this alone, at least for now. "I will manage, but thank you." Austin nodded and turned to leave, then paused at the door. "One more thing. You hear any trouble at night, you see anyone poking around that does not seem right, you fire that pistol of yours into the air. Sound carries out here, and there are enough ranches within earshot that someone will come. Do not hesitate if you feel unsafe." The warning sent a chill through her despite the warmth of the day. "Is there something I should know? Some particular danger?" "No more than usual," Austin said carefully. "But a woman alone in an abandoned house, that could attract the wrong sort of attention if word gets around. Most folks in these parts are good people, but there are always a few bad apples. Just want you to be careful." Katherine appreciated the honesty, even as it made her more aware of her vulnerable position. "I will be careful, and I will not hesitate to use this if I need to." She patted her pocket where the pistol rested. "Good." Austin smiled again, that warm expression that made her feel less alone. "I will see you day after tomorrow then, Miss Parker." "Katherine, please. Miss Parker was my mother." "Katherine," he said, and the way her name sounded in his deep voice made her stomach flutter. Then he was gone, his boots clomping across the porch and down the steps. She watched through the broken window as he mounted his horse with easy grace and rode away, the music box safe in his vest pocket. When he was out of sight, Katherine allowed herself to sit down on one of the dusty chairs, not caring about the dirt that would mark her skirt. She felt exhausted suddenly, the weight of the past weeks catching up with her all at once. Her mother's death. the journey across California, the disappointment of finding her grandfather dead and his house in ruins, and now this unexpected encounter with a cowboy who had shown her more genuine kindness in 15 minutes than most people in San Francisco had shown her in years. She thought about the music box, wondered what song it had once played. Her mother had held it sometimes in her final days, turning it over in her hands even though it made no sound. Katherine had asked once what song it played, and her mother had smiled sadly and said it was a waltz, the kind of song young people danced to at parties when the world was full of possibilities. Katherine stood and began to explore the house more thoroughly, taking inventory of what remained and what would need to be replaced. The furniture was rough but solid, the kind of handmade pieces that lasted generations if cared for properly. There was a bed frame in the single bedroom, though the mattress had been ruined by mice and weather. The kitchen still had a functional stove, as Austin had observed, though she would need to clean the chimney before attempting to use it. The well out back did indeed still work, and after drawing and discarding several buckets of questionable water, it began to run clear and cold. She filled her canteen and used the rest to start cleaning out the kitchen area. The physical work was exhausting but also therapeutic, giving her hands something to do while her mind processed everything that had happened. As the sun began to set, painting the California hills in shades of gold and orange, Katherine stood on the porch of her grandfather's house and looked out over the land. It was beautiful in a stark, wild way that was completely different from the city she had known. The air smelled of dust and sage and something else she could not quite identify, something that spoke of open spaces and freedom. She thought about Austin Vance and his offer to help. Part of her wanted to maintain her independence, to prove she could manage on her own. But a larger part recognized that accepting help was not weakness, it was wisdom. Out here, survival often depended on community and cooperation. If she was going to make a life in California, she would need to learn to be part of that community. That night, Katherine slept on the floor wrapped in her bedroll, the sounds of the wild country strange and sometimes frightening to her city-bred ears. But she also felt a sense of rightness, as if some part of her had been waiting to come to this place. Her mother had left California behind, but Katherine was coming back to reclaim what had been lost. The next day passed in a blur of cleaning and organizing. Katherine made lists of what repairs were most urgent, what supplies she would need, how much money she could afford to spend. She was practical by nature, a trait that had served her well as a teacher, and she applied that same practicality to her current situation. She also thought about Austin more than she cared to admit. The memory of his smile, the gentleness in his hands as he had taken the music box, the concern in his voice when he had warned her to be careful. Katherine had been courted before, back in San Francisco. There had been a bank clerk who had taken her to dinner twice, a junior lawyer who had sent her flowers. But none of them had made her feel the way she had felt in those brief minutes with Austin, like the ground had shifted beneath her feet and the world had suddenly become more vivid and alive. She told herself it was foolishness, a reaction to stress and grief and loneliness. She barely knew the man, but her heart did not seem to care about logic, and she found herself watching the horizon more than necessary, as if he might appear a day early. The morning of the second day, Katherine woke early and used some of her precious water supply to wash thoroughly. She told herself it was just good hygiene, but she also took extra care with her hair, pinning it up in a style that was both practical and flattering. She wore her second-best dress, the dark green one that her mother had always said brought out the color of her eyes. She was sweeping the porch when she saw him coming, a small figure on horseback that grew steadily larger as it approached. Her heart began to beat faster, and she set the broom aside, brushing dust from her skirt and checking that her hair was still in place. Austin rode up with a smile and a tip of his hat. "Good morning, Katherine. Hope I am not too early." "Not at all. I have been up for hours." She descended the porch steps to meet him, watching as he dismounted with that same fluid grace she had noticed before. "Brought you something," Austin said, reaching into his saddlebag. He pulled out a bundle wrapped in cloth. "Fresh bread from our cook and some jerky. Figured you might appreciate a break from whatever you have been eating." Katherine accepted the bundle gratefully. The bread was still slightly warm, and the smell of it made her mouth water. She had been living on hardtack and dried fruit for days. "Thank you. That is very thoughtful." "Also brought this," Austin said, his voice taking on a note of pride as he carefully withdrew the music box from his vest pocket. "Think I got it working." Katherine took the box with trembling hands. It looked the same on the outside, the carved roses still intertwined with thorns, but when she gently turned the small key, she felt it move smoothly. She held her breath and opened the lid. The most beautiful melody filled the air, delicate and haunting. The notes seemed to dance on the morning breeze, a waltz just as her mother had said, full of grace and longing and a sweetness that made Katherine's eyes fill with tears. She had never heard this song before, yet it felt familiar somehow, as if it had always been part of her, waiting to be remembered. "It is beautiful," she whispered, unable to look away from the tiny mechanism inside the box, watching the cylinder turn and the pins pluck the comb to create the music. "How did you fix it?" Mechanism was not broken, just jammed with old grease and dust. "Cleaned it out real careful, oiled the moving parts, adjusted a couple of pins that had gotten bent. Was not too hard once I figured out what was wrong." Austin sounded almost embarrassed by her gratitude, as if he had not done anything special, but to Katherine, it was everything. This music box was her last connection to her mother, to her grandmother she had never known, to a past that had been lost. And Austin had given it back to her, had made it sing again. She closed the lid and the music stopped, leaving a silence that felt heavy with unspoken things. "I do not know how to thank you," Katherine said, finally meeting his eyes. "This means more to me than I can say." "Seeing your face right now, that is thanks enough," Austin said softly. Then he seemed to shake himself, as if remembering why else he had come. "Should we take a look at the house? See what needs doing?" They spent the next hour walking through the property, with Austin making notes on a piece of paper he had brought. He was thorough and knowledgeable, pointing out problems Katherine had not even noticed and suggesting solutions that ranged from simple to complex. The roof needed patching in several places. The porch steps would need to be reinforced. The windows needed new panes and probably new frames. The chimney was blocked and would need to be cleaned. The list grew longer, and Katherine felt her spirits sinking as she calculated the cost. "It is a lot of work," Austin admitted when they had finished the inspection and were standing in the kitchen. "But the bones of the place are good. Your grandfather built solid. With some time and effort, this could be a real nice home again." "Time and money," Katherine said, trying to keep the discouragement from her voice. "I have more of the former than the latter." Austin was quiet for a moment, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, his expression thoughtful. "How are you with a hammer?" Katherine blinked at the unexpected question. "I have never actually used one, but I am a quick learner." "I was thinking," Austin said slowly, "what if we made a deal? I will help you with the repairs, bring some of the boys from the ranch to help with the bigger jobs. In exchange, you could maybe teach some reading and writing to you," Katherine asked, surprised. "No, I know my letters well enough. But there are a couple of younger hands at the ranch, good boys, but they never had schooling." Boss has been saying we should see about getting them educated a bit, but there is no school close enough. You being a teacher and all seemed like it might work out for everyone. The offer was so unexpected and so perfect that Katherine felt tears threaten again. You would do that. Help me rebuild this place in exchange for some teaching. Teaching is worth something, Austin said. And honestly, I like the work. There is something satisfying about taking something broken and making it whole again. The way he said it, looking directly at her, made Katherine wonder if he was talking about more than just houses. The air between them seemed charged with possibility, with the potential for something neither of them had quite named yet. I accept, Katherine said. And thank you, Austin. You have been kinder to me than I had any right to expect. Out here, kindness is how we survive, Austin said. He pushed away from the wall and headed toward the door. I will come back tomorrow with some supplies and a couple of the boys. We will start with the roof, since rain is coming in a few weeks and you do not want to be under a leaky roof when it does. Katherine followed him out to the porch, the music box still clutched in her hands. Austin, wait. He turned, one foot on the steps, his face open and patient. Katherine felt suddenly brave, emboldened by his kindness and the music that had returned to her life. Would you like to hear it again? The music box. I would like that very much, Austin said, and the warmth in his voice made her pulse quicken. She opened the box and the waltz played again, filling the morning air with its sweet melody. They stood there on the porch, the cowboy and the schoolteacher, listening to music that had been silenced for years and was now singing again. Katherine watched Austin's face as he listened, saw the way his expression softened, and she realized that he was not just handsome, he was good. Genuinely, deeply good in a way that was rare and precious. When the music wound down, Austin cleared his throat. That is a real pretty song. My mother said it is a waltz, Katherine said, the kind of music people dance to. You know how to waltz? Austin asked. I learned in school, but I have not danced in years. Austin smiled, that transforming expression that made her heart skip. Neither have I, we must make quite a pair. They stood there smiling at each other like fools, neither quite willing to break the moment. Finally, Austin tipped his hat. Tomorrow then, early before it gets too hot to work on the roof. Tomorrow, Katherine agreed, watching as he mounted his horse and rode away. She stood on the porch long after he had disappeared from view, the music box in her hands and hope blooming in her chest like the carved roses on the box's surface. The next day, Austin arrived with two young ranch hands he introduced as Jimmy and Thomas. They were boys, really, probably not yet 20, with sun-weathered faces and shy smiles. They worked hard and well, following Austin's directions as they began the careful process of repairing the roof. Katherine watched them work for a while, marveling at the easy camaraderie between them, the way Austin taught by showing rather than telling, patient when they made mistakes. Then she went inside and prepared a lunch from the supplies she had, stretching her provisions to feed 4 instead of 1. When she called them down for the midday meal, they ate with the kind of appetite that came from hard physical labor, thanking her profusely for the simple food. She told them about her offer to teach, and saw interest spark in both Jimmy and Thomas's eyes. Could you really teach us to read proper? Jimmy asked, his voice carrying the accent of someone who had grown up speaking more Spanish than English. I know some letters, but not enough to read a whole book. I can teach you, Katherine assured him. Reading is just a matter of practice and patience. If you are willing to put in the effort, I can help you learn. That would be something, Thomas said quietly. He was the shyer of the two, with hair so blonde it was almost white from the sun. My ma used to read to us from the Bible, but she passed when I was little. Would be nice to be able to read it myself. Then that is what we will do, Katherine said firmly. Once we get the house in better shape, we can set up proper lessons. Maybe a few hours in the evening after your ranch work is done. Boss would let us, I think, Jimmy said, looking to Austin for confirmation. He will let you, Austin said. I will make sure of it. Education is important. They went back to work after lunch, and Katherine settled in the kitchen with the supplies Austin had brought the previous day. She made a proper stew with the vegetables and salt pork he had included, something that could simmer for hours and feed them all a good dinner when the work was done. As the afternoon wore on, Katherine found herself drawn outside to watch them work. Specifically, to watch Austin work. He had removed his vest and rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing forearms tanned and muscled from years of physical labor. He moved with confidence and skill, his hands sure as he handled the tools and materials. There was something deeply attractive about watching a competent man work, Katherine realized. Not just the physical appeal, though that was certainly present, but the way he took pride in doing a job well, the way he taught the younger men with patience, the way he occasionally glanced down to where she stood and smiled at her. By the time the sun began to set, they had made significant progress on the roof. The worst of the damage had been repaired, and Austin promised that another day or two would see it completely finished. They came down tired and dirty, and Katherine fed them the stew she had made, which they ate with the same appreciation they had shown for lunch. "Miss Katherine, that is the best stew I have had in months," Jimmy declared, scraping his bowl clean. "You are a fine cook." "It is just simple food," Katherine said, but she was pleased by the compliment nonetheless. "Simple food made with care," Austin said, "is better than fancy food made without it." After Jimmy and Thomas had ridden back to the ranch, Austin lingered. He helped Katherine wash the dishes in the bucket of well water she had brought in, their hands occasionally brushing in the soapy water in a way that made her acutely aware of his proximity. "You do not have to stay and help clean up," Katherine said, though she was glad he had. "I know. Want to." Austin dried the last bowl and set it on the shelf. "Besides, wanted to ask you something." Katherine's heart skipped. "What is that?" "There is a dance in Knight's Ferry on Saturday night. Town puts one on once a month, lets folks socialize and have some fun. I was wondering if you might like to go." "With me?" Katherine felt a rush of warmth through her entire body. This was different from him helping with the house or bringing food. This was a clear declaration of romantic interest, an invitation to be seen together publicly. In a small town, going to a dance with someone meant something. "I would like that," Katherine said, her voice coming out softer than she intended. "I would like that very much." Austin's smile was brilliant. "Good. I will pick you up Saturday afternoon then. Give us time to ride in before the dance starts." He left shortly after, and Katherine stood on her porch watching him go, the music box in her hands. She opened it and let the waltz play, imagining what it would be like to dance with Austin Vance, to be held in his arms as they moved to music. The thought made her feel like a girl again, young and full of possibilities. The next few days fell into a pleasant rhythm. Austin, Jimmy, and Thomas came each morning to work on the house. They finished the roof, then moved on to repairing the porch and replacing the broken windows. Katherine cooked for them and began teaching in the evenings, starting with basic letters and sounds. Both young men were eager students, and she found teaching them deeply satisfying. But it was the moments alone with Austin that Katherine treasured most. The brief conversations they had while the others were occupied, the way he would find excuses to stand close to her, the way his eyes followed her when he thought she was not looking. She caught herself doing the same, memorizing the line of his jaw, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the deep timbre of his voice. Saturday arrived with clear skies and warm temperatures. Katherine spent extra time preparing, wearing her best dress, a deep blue silk that she had brought from San Francisco. She had not had occasion to wear it since arriving in California, and it felt strange and wonderful to dress up again, to style her hair in something more elaborate than her usual practical bun. When Austin arrived, the look on his face made all the effort worthwhile. "Katherine, you look beautiful," he said, his voice carrying a note of wonder that made her blush. "Thank you. You look quite handsome yourself." It was true. He had clearly made an effort as well, wearing what were obviously his best clothes, his face freshly shaved, his hair neatly combed. The ride to Knight's Ferry took about an hour, and they filled it with conversation. Austin told her about his life, about losing his parents young and being raised by an uncle who had taught him the ranching trade, about coming to California 3 years ago, looking for work and a fresh start, about the dreams he had of maybe owning his own small ranch someday. Nothing huge, just enough land to run some cattle and build a good life. Katherine told him about San Francisco, about her work as a teacher, about the loneliness she had felt in a crowded city, about her mother's final days and the surprise of learning about the family she had left behind in California, about the hope she felt now, despite the challenges, that maybe she had found the place where she belonged. "I am glad you came here," Austin said as they approached the town. "Glad you found your grandfather's place, even if he was not there to meet you. Feels like maybe things happen for a reason sometimes." "I think so too," Katherine said softly, and the look they exchanged spoke of more than just friendship. Knight's Ferry was larger than Katherine had expected, a bustling town that served as a hub for the surrounding ranches and farms. The dance was being held in the town hall, a large wooden building decorated with lanterns and ribbons. Music spilled out into the street, the lively sound of a fiddle, guitar, and someone playing a piano that had seen better days but still held a tune. Inside, the hall was crowded with people of all ages. Families with children, young couples, older folks sitting on the benches that lined the walls. Everyone seemed to know everyone else, and there was a warmth and sense of community that Katherine had rarely felt in the city. Austin guided her through the crowd, introducing her to what seemed like half the county. Everyone was friendly and welcoming, expressing sympathy for her grandfather's death and pleasure that his house would not stand empty anymore. Several women immediately invited her to church and to various social gatherings, and Katherine felt herself being absorbed into the community with a speed that was both overwhelming and deeply touching. "Want to dance?" Austin asked when they finally had a moment to themselves. Katherine looked at the dance floor where couples were spinning through what looked like a lively reel. "I do not know this dance." "That is all right. I will teach you, same as you are teaching Jimmy and Thomas their letters." Austin held out his hand, and Katherine took it, letting him lead her onto the floor. The first dance was chaotic and fun, with Katherine laughing as she tried to keep up with the quick steps and frequent changes in direction. Austin was patient, guiding her through the movements, and by the end she was starting to get the hang of it. They danced several more reels and line dances, each one easier than the last as Katherine learned the patterns. She was flushed and happy, more alive than she had felt in months, maybe years. The music, the movement, the feeling of Austin's hand in hers, it all combined to create a sense of joy that was almost overwhelming. Then the music changed. The fiddle player announced a waltz, and couples came together in a more formal hold. Katherine felt her heart begin to race as Austin turned to her. "May I?" he asked formally, holding out his hand. "You may," Katherine replied, placing her hand in his. Austin's right hand settled at her waist, warm through the silk of her dress. She placed her left hand on his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him beneath the fabric of his jacket. Their joined hands lifted to the proper position, and then they were moving, swept into the flow of dancers circling the floor. The music was different from the tune in her music box, but it was still a waltz, still three-quarter time. Katherine closed her eyes for a moment and imagined she could hear the delicate notes from her mother's music box layered over the fiddle and piano. When she opened them, Austin was looking at her with such tenderness that she felt her breath catch. "I have thought about this," Austin said quietly, his voice nearly lost in the music but somehow clear to her ears. "Ever since you said it was a waltz, I have thought about dancing with you." "So have I," Katherine admitted, feeling brave in the moment. "I wound the music box and imagined what it would be like." "Is it like you imagined?" Austin asked, pulling her slightly closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Better," Katherine whispered. "So much better." They danced through the rest of the waltz in silence, communicating in the language of movement and proximity and shared breath. When the music ended, they stood still for a moment, reluctant to separate, until the next lively tune started and broke the spell. "Want to get some air?" Austin asked, and Katherine nodded, suddenly needing space to process the intensity of what she was feeling. Outside, the night air was cool and welcome after the warmth of the crowded hall. Austin led her to a quiet corner of the porch that wrapped around the building. The music was still audible but muted, and they could see the stars scattered across the black sky like diamonds on velvet. "Katherine," Austin began, then paused as if gathering courage. "I know we have not known each other long, just a week, really. But I feel like I need to be honest with you about how I am feeling." Katherine's heart pounded. "All right. From the moment I saw you in that abandoned house, holding that pistol like you were ready to take on the world, something in me just knew. I have been trying to tell myself it is too soon, that I should take things slow and proper, but then we danced just now and I realized I do not want to wait to tell you." He took her hand in both of his calloused palms warm against her skin. "I am falling in love with you, Katherine Parker. Maybe already fallen if I am being completely honest." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, happy tears. "I feel it too. I thought maybe I was crazy, feeling so much so fast. But Austin, when I am with you, I feel like I have come home. Not just to California or to my grandfather's house, but to something deeper, to where I was always supposed to be." "Katherine, can I kiss you?" Austin asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes," she breathed, and then his lips were on hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tender and questioning, but it quickly deepened into something more passionate. Katherine's hands came up to his chest, feeling his heart pounding as hard as her own. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and she melted into him, into the kiss, into the moment when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard. Austin rested his forehead against hers. "I want to court you proper," he said. "Want to do this right." "I would like that," Katherine said, smiling against his lips as he kissed her again, softer this time. They stayed outside for a while longer, talking and stealing kisses, making plans for the future that suddenly seemed bright with possibility. When they finally rejoined the dance, everyone seemed to sense that something had shifted between them, and Katherine received knowing smiles from several of the women. The ride back to her house was slower than the ride in, neither of them in a hurry to end the evening. They stopped halfway there, and Austin spread his saddle blanket on the ground so they could sit and look at the stars. "Tell me about your dreams," Katherine said, leaning against his shoulder. "Your real dreams, the ones you do not tell just anyone." Austin was quiet for a moment, his arm around her shoulders. "I want a small ranch of my own. Not huge, maybe 100 acres, enough to run some cattle, grow some crops, a house big enough for a family, a life where I work hard but come home to people I love at the end of the day." He paused. "I know it might sound simple compared to city life." "It sounds perfect," Katherine said honestly. "I spent years in the city, Austin, and I was never happy. I thought that was just how life was, that you found a job and did it and got by. But being here, being with you, I feel like I am finally seeing what life could be." "What about you?" Austin asked. "What are your dreams?" Katherine thought about it. "I want to teach. I want to make a difference in young lives the way my mother did for me. I want a home that feels like a home, filled with love and laughter. I want to belong somewhere, to be part of a community." She turned to look at him in the starlight. "I want to love and be loved in return." "You are," Austin said, kissing her forehead. "You are loved, Katherine. I love you." "I love you too," she said, saying the words for the first time but knowing they were true, had perhaps been true since the moment he had carefully taken her music box and promised to fix it. They talked late into the night, sharing stories and dreams and secrets. By the time Austin finally took her home, the stars were beginning to fade and the first hint of dawn was touching the eastern horizon. "I will be back tomorrow," Austin said as he helped her down from her horse. "Well, today, I suppose, once I get some sleep. We still have work to do on the house." "Thank you," Katherine said, "for everything. The dance, the kiss, the words, for loving me." "Easiest thing I have ever done," Austin said, kissing her one more time before mounting his horse and riding away. Katherine went inside and immediately went to the music box, opening it and letting the waltz play. She danced alone in her kitchen as the sun came up, imagining Austin's arms around her, and she knew with absolute certainty that she had found what she had been looking for. Not just a connection to her past, but a bridge to her future. The next weeks passed in a blur of work and joy. The house slowly transformed from a ruin into a home. Austin and the ranch hands worked on the major repairs, and Katherine learned to wield a hammer and paintbrush alongside them. Her teaching lessons with Jimmy and Thomas expanded to include 2 more young ranch hands and the teenage daughter of a neighboring farmer. Word spread that there was a teacher in the area, and parents began approaching her about educating their children. Austin courted her properly, as he had promised. He brought her flowers picked from the wild fields. He took her on picnics to beautiful spots he knew in the surrounding countryside. He introduced her to more of the community, making sure she felt welcomed and included. And he kissed her every chance he got, stolen moments that made her heart race and her knees weak. They talked about the future openly now. Austin had been saving money for years toward his dream of owning land, and Katherine's grandfather's property, while small, was a start. The house sat on 20 acres, enough for a small herd and a good garden. If they combined their resources and their dreams, they could build something together. "Marry me," Austin said one evening as they sat on her newly repaired porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Katherine turned to look at him, her heart full to overflowing. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you, Austin Vance." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, pouring all his love and promise into it. When they broke apart, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It was simple, a thin gold band with a small garnet set in it. "It was my mother's," Austin said, his voice thick with emotion. "Only thing I have left of her. I would be honored if you would wear it." "Austin, I would be honored to wear it," Katherine said, tears streaming down her face as he slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. They set the date for early September, giving them time to finish the house and make the necessary preparations. The wedding would be small, held at the church in Knight's Ferry, followed by a celebration at the town hall where they had danced that first waltz. The weeks leading up to the wedding were busy and happy. The women of the community rallied around Katherine, helping her make a wedding dress and prepare for the celebration. The men helped Austin and the other ranch hands put the finishing touches on the house, making sure everything was perfect for when he brought his bride home. Jimmy and Thomas had become Katherine's star pupils, able to read simple books now and write basic letters. They were also becoming friends, as dear to her as younger brothers might have been. They promised to help with whatever Katherine and Austin might need after the wedding. The night before the wedding, Katherine sat alone in her house, the music box open on the table beside her, its waltz playing softly. She thought about her mother, wished she could have been there to see this day, to meet Austin and know that her daughter had found happiness. But she also felt her mother's presence somehow, as if Margaret Parker was watching over her and smiling. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful. Katherine dressed in the gown the women had helped her make, simple but elegant white cotton with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. She wore wildflowers in her hair and carried a bouquet of the same blooms. Austin waited for her at the church, looking more handsome than she had ever seen him in a new suit, his eyes shining with love and anticipation. When she walked down the aisle on the arm of the ranch owner who had agreed to give her away, Austin's eyes filled with tears. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They exchanged vows to love and honor each other, to build a life together, to face whatever challenges came with unity and faith. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Austin kissed her with such tenderness that Katherine felt her heart might burst from happiness. The celebration afterward was joyous and lively. There was food and music and dancing. Katherine and Austin had their first dance as husband and wife to a waltz, and she thought about the music box, about how something broken and silent had been made whole and given voice again. It felt like a metaphor for her own life, for the love she had found in the most unexpected place. "What are you thinking?" Austin asked as they danced. "That I am the happiest I have ever been," Katherine said honestly. "That I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone, that our life together is going to be wonderful." "It is," Austin agreed, pulling her closer. "I promise you, Katherine, I am going to spend every day of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." "I could never regret this," Katherine said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me." As the evening wore on, the celebration showed no signs of slowing. But eventually, Austin leaned down to whisper in Katherine's ear, "Ready to go home, Mrs. Vance?" The sound of her new name sent a thrill through her. "Yes, Mr. Vance, I am ready." They slipped away amid cheers and good-natured teasing, riding together on Austin's horse toward the house that was now truly theirs. The night was clear and cool, the stars brilliant overhead, and Katherine had never felt so alive, so full of hope and love and possibility. When they arrived home, Austin insisted on carrying her over the threshold, making them both laugh. Inside, the house glowed with the warm light of the lamps they had left burning. It looked beautiful, all their hard work having transformed it into a real home. "Happy?" Austin asked, setting her down and pulling her into his arms. "Happier than I have words for," Katherine said, rising on her toes to kiss him. That night they became husband and wife in every sense, their love physical as well as emotional and spiritual. Austin was gentle and patient, making sure Katherine felt cherished and safe. And when they finally lay together in the darkness, wrapped in each other's arms, Katherine felt a sense of completeness she had never known before. The months that followed were filled with hard work and deep contentment. They worked together to run the small property, with Austin doing the heavy labor of ranching while Katherine tended the garden and continued teaching the local children. They made a good team, complementing each other's strengths and supporting each other through the inevitable challenges. Their first winter together was mild by California standards, but it still brought challenges they had to face together. When a storm damaged their newly repaired roof, they worked side by side to fix it. When Katherine fell ill with a fever, Austin nursed her with such devotion that she fell in love with him all over again. When Austin injured his hand and could not work for a week, Katherine took on extra chores without complaint. By the spring of 1879, Katherine realized she was pregnant. She told Austin one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sun set over their land. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for, joy and wonder and a tenderness that made her cry. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "Katherine, we are going to be parents. Are you happy?" she asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Austin said, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "You have given me everything I ever dreamed of and so much more." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, with Katherine continuing to teach until she grew too large and uncomfortable. The women of the community rallied around her again, bringing baby clothes they had made and offering advice on childbirth and motherhood. Katherine felt surrounded by love and support, part of a community in a way she had never experienced in the city. Austin was attentive and protective, hovering over her in a way that was sometimes annoying but mostly endearing. He built a cradle with his own hands, carving it from beautiful oak and finishing it with care. Katherine sewed blankets and gowns, preparing for the baby's arrival with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. On a warm day in October, Katherine went into labor. The midwife was summoned, along with several of the local women who had become her friends. Austin paced outside, too anxious to be still, until one of the women finally took pity on him and let him in to hold his wife's hand. The labor was long and difficult, but Katherine was strong. And when their son finally entered the world with a loud cry that announced his arrival to anyone within earshot, Katherine and Austin both wept with joy and relief. "He is perfect," Austin said, holding his son for the first time, his hands so large compared to the tiny baby, but infinitely gentle. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Katherine asked, exhausted but radiantly happy. They had discussed names but never quite decided. Now, looking at their son, Austin said, "Henry, after your grandfather, so your family name continues." Katherine felt tears stream down her face. "Henry Vance. It is perfect." Little Henry was a good baby, healthy and strong. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes, and both parents thought he was the most beautiful child ever born. Austin proved to be a devoted father, getting up with Katherine for nighttime feedings, singing off-key lullabies, and spending hours just watching his son sleep. "I never knew I could love this much," Austin told Katherine one night as they stood over Henry's cradle together. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes, and now there is him too, and I just want to protect you both and make sure you have everything you need and never know hardship." "We will face whatever comes together," Katherine said, leaning into her husband's warmth. "The three of us, we are a family." Life settled into a new rhythm. Katherine's teaching had to take a backseat to caring for Henry, but she still gave lessons when she could, with the baby sleeping in his cradle nearby. Austin continued working their land and picking up extra work at neighboring ranches when needed. Money was tight sometimes, but they had everything that mattered. As Henry grew from baby to toddler, his personality emerged. He was curious and adventurous, always getting into things, keeping Katherine on her toes. But he was also sweet and affectionate, giving hugs freely and laughing at everything. "He has your smile," Katherine told Austin one day as they watched Henry play in the yard, "And your stubbornness," Austin replied with a grin. "Kid knows what he wants and is not shy about letting us know." They were happy. Deeply, truly happy in a way that both of them had once thought impossible. The love between them had not faded with time and familiarity, but had instead grown deeper and richer. They still danced in their kitchen when the mood struck, Katherine winding up the music box so they could waltz to its delicate tune. It had become a tradition, a way of remembering where they had started and celebrating where they were. When Henry was 3, Katherine became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was harder, with more sickness and discomfort. Austin worried constantly, but Katherine assured him she was fine, that some pregnancies were just more difficult than others. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1883, arriving quickly and with less drama than her brother's birth. They named her Margaret, after Katherine's mother, and called her Maggie for short. She had blonde hair like her mother once had and eyes that shifted between gray and blue depending on the light. Henry was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. Austin had to constantly remind him to be gentle, but the boy's intentions were good. Katherine would often find him singing to Maggie, the same off-key lullabies Austin sang, and her heart would swell with love for her growing family. The years passed, marked by the milestones of children growing and a marriage deepening. Henry started proper school when he was 6, riding into town with his father several days a week. Maggie proved to be just as curious as her brother, but with a quieter, more thoughtful nature. She loved when Katherine played the music box, dancing around the kitchen with the unself-conscious joy of childhood. Austin eventually managed to buy some additional land adjoining their property, expanding their small ranch. It was not the 100 acres he had once dreamed of, but it was enough. They had a good herd of cattle, a productive garden, chickens, and a life that, while not wealthy, was comfortable and secure. Katherine returned to teaching more formally once both children were in school, converting one of the rooms in their house into a small schoolhouse for the youngest children in the area. She loved the work, loved seeing young minds open to learning, loved being able to make a difference. Sometimes she thought about her old life in San Francisco, about the woman she had been before she came to California seeking her grandfather's home. That Katherine seemed like a stranger now, someone sad and lonely and lost. The Katherine she had become was confident and loved and exactly where she belonged. "You ever regret it?" Austin asked her one night as they lay in bed, the sounds of their children sleeping peacefully down the hall. "Giving up the city, staying here in the middle of nowhere?" "Never," Katherine said firmly. "Not once. This is where I was always meant to be, with you, with our children, building this life. I found myself here, Austin. You helped me find myself." "You did the same for me," Austin said, pulling her close. "I was just going through the motions before you, just working and existing. You gave me purpose, gave me a reason to build something lasting." They made love that night with the ease and passion of long familiarity, still deeply attracted to each other after years of marriage. Afterward, Katherine lay with her head on Austin's chest, listening to his heartbeat, and felt profoundly grateful for the broken music box that had brought them together. The children grew. Henry became a young man, tall and strong like his father, with a good heart and a quick mind. He talked about becoming a rancher like his father, maybe eventually taking over their property and expanding it. Maggie developed a love of teaching, often helping her mother with the younger students. She had a gift for making complex ideas simple, and Katherine suspected she would make an excellent teacher herself someday. In the summer of 1895, when Henry was 16 and Maggie was 12, Katherine's past came back in an unexpected way. A letter arrived, forwarded through several addresses, from a lawyer in San Francisco. Catherine's mother had had a sister Catherine had never known about, and that aunt had recently passed away, leaving a small inheritance to her niece. The inheritance was not a fortune, but it was enough to make a difference. After much discussion, Catherine and Austin decided to use the money to build a proper school building in Knights Ferry. The town had grown over the years, and the tiny schoolhouse was no longer adequate. Catherine would be the head teacher, and they planned to hire 1 or 2 others to help. The school was built over the summer and fall, a beautiful wooden building with large windows to let in plenty of light and enough room for several classrooms. The community pitched in to help, and when it opened in January of 1896, it was with great celebration. Catherine stood in her new classroom on the first day, looking at the eager faces of the students, and felt a sense of completion. She had come to California seeking her past and had instead found her future. She had taken something broken and made it whole, just as Austin had fixed her music box all those years ago. Henry graduated from school that year and decided to stay on the ranch, working alongside his father. Together, they planned to expand the herd and improve the land. Maggie announced her intention to become a teacher like her mother, and Catherine could not have been prouder. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and occasional sorrows. Austin's uncle, who had raised him, passed away peacefully in his sleep. They mourned him and honored his memory by naming their next horse after him. Several of Catherine's students went on to college, something that filled her with pride. The ranch prospered, never making them wealthy but providing a comfortable living. As they approached middle age, Catherine and Austin found their love had not diminished, but had transformed into something even more precious. It was not just passion anymore, though that still flared between them. It was partnership and friendship and shared history. It was knowing someone so completely that words were often unnecessary. It was still choosing each other, every day, year after year. One evening, when they were both in their 40s and their children were grown, Catherine got out the music box. It still worked perfectly, thanks to Austin's careful repair all those years ago, and the loving maintenance they had both given it since. "Dance with me," she said, holding out her hand to her husband. Austin smiled, that same transforming expression that had made her heart skip all those years ago. "Always," he said, taking her hand. They danced in their kitchen as the sun set outside, the same waltz they had first danced to at the town hall in Knights Ferry. Their steps were familiar now, their movements perfectly synchronized from years of practice. But the magic was still there, the sense of connection and love and rightness. "I love you, Katherine Vance," Austin said as the music played. "Have loved you since the moment I saw you in that broken-down house, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," Catherine said, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for fixing the music box. Thank you for asking me to dance. Thank you for loving me." "Easiest thing I ever did," Austin said, echoing words he had spoken years before, and kissed her as the music played on. Henry married a few years later to a nice young woman from a neighboring ranch. They settled on a piece of land Austin helped them buy, starting their own family. Maggie became a teacher as she had planned, working alongside her mother at the school for several years before accepting a position at a larger school in Sacramento. She promised to visit often and kept that promise. Catherine and Austin became grandparents, a role they embraced with joy. Their grandchildren loved visiting the ranch, loved hearing stories of the old days, loved the music box that their grandmother would play for them. Henry's oldest son was fascinated by it, and Catherine promised that someday it would be his, passed down through the generations as a reminder of where their family began. As they grew older, Austin and Katherine spent more time simply being together. They still worked, but at a slower pace. They spent evenings on their porch, watching the sun set over land they had worked and loved for decades. They attended church regularly, contributed to the community, and were respected as elders who had lived good lives and raised their family well. In the spring of 1910, they celebrated their 31st wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a party, and Katherine looked around at the life they had built and felt overwhelming gratitude. She had lost so much when her mother died, had felt so alone and lost. But that loss had led her here, to this man and this life and this family. That night, after everyone had gone home, Katherine and Austin sat on their porch in comfortable silence. The stars were brilliant overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss all those years ago. "Play it for me," Austin asked, nodding toward the music box Katherine had brought outside. She opened it, and the delicate waltz filled the night air. Austin stood and held out his hand. "Dance with me, Katherine." She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. They danced on the porch, moving slowly, their bodies remembering the steps even as age made them less graceful than they had once been. But it did not matter. What mattered was the feel of his arms around her, the warmth of his body against hers, the love that still burned bright after 3 decades together. "I would do it all again," Austin said softly as they swayed to the music. "Every challenge, every hardship, every moment. I would do it all again to end up right here with you." "So would I," Katherine said. "You are my greatest adventure, Austin Vance, my greatest love, my home." They kissed as the music played, the cowboy and the schoolteacher still in love after all these years. The music box sang its sweet song into the night, a testament to the power of love and second chances, and the magic that happens when something broken is made whole again. Years continued to pass, bringing with them the inevitable challenges of aging. Austin developed arthritis that made ranch work increasingly difficult, though he stubbornly refused to give up completely. Katherine's eyes grew weaker, forcing her to finally retire from teaching, though she still gave private lessons to children who needed extra help. They leaned on each other more, but their love remained a constant. Henry took over most of the ranch work, running the operation with his father serving more as an advisor than active partner. Maggie visited monthly, usually bringing one or more of the grandchildren with her. The house that Katherine and Austin had rebuilt together was always full of life and laughter when family came to call. On their 40th anniversary in 1919, their children threw them a large party in Knight's Ferry. It seemed like the entire town turned out to celebrate the couple who had been part of the community for so long. There was music and dancing, and someone made sure to play a waltz so Austin and Katherine could dance together as they had so many times before. 40 years, Katherine said wonderingly as they moved across the floor. "How did we get so lucky? We chose each other," Austin said simply. "Every day we chose love. That is not luck, that is a decision we made and kept making." The party was wonderful, but Katherine was relieved when they finally went home, just the two of them. Large gatherings exhausted her now in a way they never had before. Austin seemed to understand, settling them both in their comfortable chairs on the porch and bringing out the music box. "Remember when I first fixed this?" Austin asked, holding the box carefully. "You were so young and sad and brave, standing in that wreck of a house with a pistol in your hand. And you were this cowboy who showed me more kindness than I had any reason to expect," Katherine said. "You gave me back music, Austin. You gave me back joy. You gave me a life worth living." "We gave that to each other," Austin corrected gently. He opened the music box and let the waltz play. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the familiar melody, remembering all the times they had danced to this tune over the decades. As the 1920s dawned, bringing with them a new era and new changes, Katherine and Austin found their world growing smaller and quieter. But within that smaller world, their love remained vast and deep. They spent their days in simple routines, tending the garden, reading aloud to each other, playing with grandchildren who visited, and always dancing to the music box when evening came. Health challenges arose. Austin had a heart scare that landed him in bed for weeks. Katherine nursed him through it with the same devotion he had shown her during her illnesses over the years. When Katherine fell and broke her wrist, Austin learned to help her with all the tasks that had suddenly become difficult. They had promised to face everything together, and they kept that promise. Their 50th anniversary in 1929 was a quieter affair than the 40th had been, just family gathered at the ranch, but it was no less meaningful. Katherine looked around at the children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren who had gathered, and marveled at what she and Austin had created. All of this love, all of these people, had begun with a broken music box and a cowboy brave enough to ask a frightened woman to trust him. 50 years, Austin said that evening as they prepared for bed. Half a century of loving you, and it still does not feel like enough. We still have time, Katherine said, though they both knew that time was growing shorter. They were both in their 70s now, and while they were in reasonably good health for their age, they could not ignore reality forever. However much time we have, I will use it loving you, Austin promised, kissing her forehead gently. They made love that night, slowly and tenderly, their bodies familiar maps they had been exploring for 50 years. Afterward, they lay together in the darkness, and Katherine thought about all the nights they had spent like this, all the ways they had loved each other over the decades. Austin, she said softly, if something happens to me, I want you to know that you made my life beautiful. I was so lost before I found you, before you found me. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. Katherine, do not talk like that, Austin said, his voice rough. You are going to be around to torment me for years yet. Maybe, Katherine allowed. But if not, I wanted you to know. And I want you to promise me that you will give the music box to Henry's oldest boy like we planned. Let it stay in the family, a reminder of where we started. I promise, Austin said, but you are going to be the one to give it to him, years from now when he is old enough to appreciate the story behind it. As it turned out, they would have several more good years together. The early 1930s were difficult for many people, with the economic depression affecting everyone. But Katherine and Austin were largely insulated from the worst of it, living simply on their paid-off land with family around to help when needed. They had never been wealthy, so having less did not change their lives dramatically. What did change was their energy and health. Austin's heart gave him more trouble, and the doctor warned that he needed to take it easy. Katherine developed problems with her lungs that made breathing difficult sometimes. They both knew they were approaching the end of their time together, and rather than making them sad, it seemed to make every moment more precious. They spent their days doing the things they loved, sitting on the porch, tending a small garden, playing with great-grandchildren, and always dancing to the music box. Katherine wound it daily, the ritual as much a part of their lives as breathing. In the autumn of 1935, 56 years after they had met, Austin had a massive heart attack. It happened quickly, without much warning. One moment he was laughing at something Henry had said, the next he was clutching his chest and falling. Katherine rushed to his side, her own pain forgotten in her fear for him. The doctor was summoned, but there was little he could do. Austin was moved to his bed and the family gathered, knowing the end was near. But Austin insisted on some time alone with Katherine first, and everyone else reluctantly left the room. "I am sorry," Austin said, his voice weak but still warm with love. "I wanted more time with you." "We had 56 years," Katherine said through her tears, holding his hand in both of hers. "More than many people get, and every day was a gift, Austin. Every single day." "The music box," Austin said. "Play it for me." One last time, Katherine carefully opened the music box with shaking hands, and the waltz began to play. She climbed into bed beside her husband, careful of his fragile state, and they lay together listening to the music that had been the soundtrack of their love story. "Thank you," Austin whispered as the music played. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for the life we built." "Thank you for fixing the music box," Katherine said, her tears falling freely now. "Thank you for asking me to dance. Thank you for choosing me." "Always you," Austin said. "In every life, in every time, I would always choose you." He died peacefully an hour later with Katherine holding his hand and the music box playing its sweet tune. The family came in to say their goodbyes, but Katherine could not let go, could not quite accept that he was gone. The funeral was large, attended by what seemed like the entire county. Austin had touched many lives over his decades of living, and people came to pay their respects and support the family. Katherine sat through it all in a daze, feeling like half of herself had been carved away. The days after were the hardest Katherine had ever known, worse even than losing her mother because she had not yet known Austin then, had not built a life so intertwined with another person that his absence left her feeling incomplete. Her children tried to comfort her, suggested she come stay with one of them, but Katherine refused. She wanted to be in the house she and Austin had made into a home, surrounded by memories of their life together. She wound the music box every day and listened to the waltz, remembering every dance they had shared. Sometimes she thought she could feel Austin there with her, could sense his presence in the house. It was probably just wishful thinking, but it comforted her nonetheless. Winter came, and Katherine's health declined rapidly. The lung problems she had been managing became much worse, and the doctor said privately to Henry that she was not fighting very hard to get better. Henry understood. His mother had lost her reason to keep going, and her body was simply following where her heart had already gone, on. A cold January night in 1936, just 3 months after Austin's death, Katherine called Henry to her bedside. She knew her time was short, could feel it in the heaviness of her chest, and the way everything seemed to be fading around the edges. "The music box," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Give it to your son like we planned, and tell him the story, Henry. Tell him about the broken music box and the cowboy who fixed it and asked the sad woman to dance. Tell him about real love, the kind that lasts a lifetime and beyond." "I will, Mama," Henry promised, tears streaming down his face. "I will tell him and make sure he tells his children so the story never gets forgotten." "Good," Katherine said. She smiled then, a genuine smile of peace and even joy. "I can see him, Henry. Your father, he is here. He is waiting for me." "Tell him I said hello," Henry managed through his tears. "Tell him we will take care of everything here." "He knows," Katherine said. "He is so proud of you, of all our children and what we created together." She closed her eyes then, the smile still on her face, and slipped away peacefully. Henry sat with her for a long time, holding her hand, grateful that she was no longer in pain, grateful that she had found peace, grateful for the example of love she and his father had shown him. Katherine was buried next to Austin in the Knights Ferry Cemetery, under a tree they had both loved. The service was beautiful, and afterward, Henry took the music box home with him, as his mother had instructed. That evening, he gathered his children and grandchildren and told them the story. He told them about a young woman who had come to California seeking family and found only an empty house. About a cowboy who had shown kindness to a stranger and fixed a broken music box. About falling in love and building a life together through hard work and devotion. About dancing to a waltz in the kitchen and loving each other through 5 decades of joy and sorrow. When he finished, he opened the music box and let the waltz play. The delicate notes filled the room, and Henry's oldest son, named Austin after his grandfather, listened with tears in his eyes. "I will treasure it," young Austin promised. "And I will tell my children the story just like you told us. They will know about the love that started our family." "That is all I ask," Henry said. "That is what they would have wanted." The music box was passed down through the generations, exactly as Katherine and Austin had hoped. Each generation learned the story of the schoolteacher from San Francisco and the cowboy who fixed her music box and asked her to dance. They learned about real love, about choosing someone every day, about building something lasting through dedication and devotion. The ranch stayed in the family, expanded and improved by each generation but never sold. The house where Katherine and Austin had lived and loved was preserved as much as possible, a reminder of where it all began. Great-great-grandchildren played in the same yard where Henry and Maggie had played, creating new memories on land steeped in history and love. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind was just right, people swore they could hear the faint strains of a waltz playing, could see 2 figures dancing in the kitchen of the old house. No one was frightened by it. Instead, they smiled, recognizing it for what it was, the echo of a love so strong it had transcended death itself, a reminder that some promises really do last forever. The music box still played, maintained carefully by each generation who inherited it. The tune was as clear and sweet as it had been that first day when Austin had handed it back to Katherine, fixed and singing again. Like the love it represented, it had endured through time, a small wooden box containing the memory of 2 people who had found each other when both were broken and had healed together. It was a love story for the ages, the kind that reminded people what was possible when you opened your heart to hope. A schoolteacher and a cowboy, a broken music box and a dance, a life built on love and devotion and the simple choice to keep choosing each other, day after day, year after year, until death parted them, and then even beyond. In the end, it was not the size of the ranch or the money in the bank or any material achievement that mattered. It was the love. Always and forever, it was the love. That was Katherine and Austin's true legacy, the thing that would outlast even the music box itself. They had loved each other deeply and completely, and in doing so, had shown everyone who knew them what was possible. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, 2 souls were dancing still, moving to the eternal music of a love that would never end, a waltz that would play forever in the hearts of all who heard their story and believed in the transforming power of love.